I'm Ed Shiley, an associate rector at St. David's Episcopal Church in Wayne, Pennsylvania, and I'm here to talk about a life of prayer. Now, I think any conversation about prayer has to begin with an understanding of what prayer is. If I were to ask people on the street, what is prayer? I would probably get as many different definitions as a number of people I was interviewing. The answers would probably range from rigid formulas on how to pray to ideas about experiencing God in anything, a beautiful painting, a piece of music, a beautiful sunset, etc. And they would all be partially correct. Prayer is simply communion and intimacy with God. It is our conversation with God. But the key to this definition is that communion, intimacy, and conversation all require two-way actions. That is, they flow in both directions. They flow from us to God and from God to us. Thus, prayer is a dialogue, not a monologue. Many people have said to me over the years, I don't know how to pray. And I always respond, just talk to God. The closeness and intimacy of prayer needs no formula, needs no flowery words. There's no need to seek the right way to say something to God. In fact, prayer, as in all intimacy, often needs no words at all. A relationship of trust and love with God begins with our first prayer and is deepened every time we pray. There's no reason to worry over the correct words to use. St. Paul says in his letter to the Romans, "For we do not know how to pray as we ought, but that very Spirit intercedes with sighs too deep for words." In other words, don't worry about the correct words, because it is the Spirit of God that takes over and prays in us when we seek a prayerful relationship with God. Prayer, then, is simply conversation with our dearest companion, with God. And when we can't think of what to say, the Spirit of God knows and intervenes. Now, to understand how the act of praying becomes a life of prayer, the metaphor of fitness, of being fit, gets us there. For most of us, maybe all of us, we don't start out wanting to work out or to putting in the hard work of becoming a world-class runner, golfer, or tennis player. There was a beginning, a time when we just had to get off the couch and start. And so it is with prayer. We just have to start, just have to say, God, I'm here and I want to talk with you. We have to begin. Now, athletes know there are days that you really have to push yourself to get up and to get out there to do the work. And it is the same with a life of prayer, especially in the beginning. There are so many distractions, so many things that need to be done, things that we can put before our prayers. But just like a well-trained athlete, the practice, the habit, must push us forward. If we don't have a good workout or prayer time, even if we let other things get in the way and miss a whole day, the commitment to the habit, the practice, must push us forward the next day and the day after. Habit is the key. And when golf, tennis, swimming, playing the piano, gardening, and any number of other disciplines become something we cannot live without, the distractions, the missed days grow less and less because we now love what we are doing. Likewise, The habit of praying regularly becomes a life of prayer, a time when God has custody of our hearts, our very soul, and we find joy in all things. The creation stories in the book of Genesis tells us that we are made to live in a delicate network of interdependence with one another, with God, and with the rest of creation. A life of prayer takes us back to that for which we were created. It is about learning to live in harmony with God, with oneself, and with the world. Where will a life of prayer lead? To transformation, love, understanding, wisdom, and much, much more. As a people, we are a remarkable paradox. We are the finite made of the infinite. We are time-bound, but long for the transcendent, the eternal. And we are always restless until our hearts find their rest in God. Prayer gets us there. Now, there are many ways to pray, to achieve intimacy with God. And part 2 of Life of Prayer will explore those with you. But I want to end this session by sharing my personal experience with prayer. Like many, I started out not knowing what to say to God. I was nervous about praying, especially publicly, because I might say the wrong thing or not be able to think of anything to say. About 45 years ago, a friend of mine introduced me to a wonderfully spiritual man, an Episcopalian who identified himself as a Christian mystic. For the next 12 years, he taught me how to meditate and was my spiritual mentor. It was a difficult journey. Putting my ego aside while in conversation with God was not an easy thing for me. Learning to move my mind into my heart, into the core of my being and personhood was tough. But the habit, the practice was worth it. Now I can't wait to meditate each day, to be in the silence of my soul, in the presence of God's love and light, filled with a peace beyond understanding. 45 years later, it is possible to carry those mountaintop experiences with me for longer and longer periods of time as I encounter this world. Thank you for this time together, and may your life of prayer bring you the great joy of being with the beloved in a silence that becomes ever more wordless and imageless. Amen.